like to try to start speaking, but I don't know if many people can hear me. Was that almost impossible to hear?
I can actually hear you now better than I could before.
Oh, that would be great. Is that coming through okay? Oh, wonderful,
Yep.
wonderful. This is my favorite thing to talk about. So I would be so upset if I could not talk about this. I could talk about this for 8 hours in a row. Well, thank you for the introduction. Our talk is on Skeletons, Museum of Osteology. We have our location in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The presentation, I talk a little bit about the history of the museum. Why do we have it? Why were we founded? How do we clean and prepare skeletons? And then a little bit about the museum. I think my voice is actually trying to come back, but I know this is not ideal. So thank you all so much for your patience.
I think you're doing great so far. Thank you.
Awesome. Oh, so we're going to begin about our museum. And I wonder if anyone here has ever heard of the Museum of Osteology or heard of Skulls Unlimited before. Most likely, if you're into natural history and skeletal specimens, you've heard of Skulls Unlimited before. At the Museum of Osteology, our mission is to explore and reveal the form and function of the skeletal system. Here at the Oklahoma City location, we have 450 real skeletons on display. We have about 800 total specimens on display. We focus on modern extant species. We focus on animals that are primarily species that are seen in zoos and aquariums. We have many rare species in our collection, such as the Sumatran rhino skeleton. We have Javan rhino. We have okapi, bonobo. We have so many rare specimens not normally seen in other collections. This is a private collection of one founder who's been collecting skulls since he was 7 years old. And this is his private collection. So he definitely believes that conservation must begin through education and appreciation of the natural world. That's why we focus so much only on modern species and the importance of them. And sometimes we have to talk about their plight. The history of our museum began in 1973 when Jay, the founder of the museum and also the president of Skulls Unlimited, found his first skull in the woods. He was walking in the woods with his brother at the age of 7, and the boys came across a skeleton in a blanket, and they thought they found a human skeleton. And they were very concerned. Well, they brought it to their dad, and their dad was able to see, this definitely was not a human skeleton, but he had no idea what type of animal he was looking at. But he encouraged Jay to try to figure out what type of animal he had found. He encouraged Jay to actually explore his curiosity. And Jay took the bones to the library, and he was able to figure out, based on the dentition and the cranial index, what type of skull he was looking at. He had actually come across a domestic dog skull, and that was his first skull he ever found. Later, he found a cat skull, and the similarities and differences between the cat and the dog really intrigued him. And Jay was one of those little boys who had learned, one of those kids that had to know everything about that topic. He had field guides. He was going on expeditions. He was taking notes. He was developing dichotomous keys. He was creating his own collection from roadkill and bones that he had found just as a boy walking around in the woods. And it was there his love of osteology started. Oh, we just got a great comment that closed caption is accurate. That's such great news. Thank you for letting us know, Susan. Well, Jay began collecting the bones, and he was experimenting. What is the best way to clean them? Of course, natural history museums have been using fleshing beetles to clean specimens for over 150 years, but Jay began experimenting with boiling the skeletons, burying the skeletons, using lye to try to process the skeletons. And it was actually in the mid 1980s, about 1985, 1986, that our original beetle colony was collected. It was collected here in the Oklahoma City metro. And Jay gathered up these insects and he started to cultivate them, try to breed them. And he had no idea what he was doing, but he knew to get started. And that was where original colony came off of. But they have so many great stories from back in those early days of Jay by trial and error, trying to clean these skeletons. As soon as his mother would leave the home, he would begin boiling bobcats on the stove in the kitchen. So there's so many interesting stories from back in that time of them trying to clean these skeletons. But of course, we've been cleaning specimens now for professionally, as a company, professionally for 37 years. And he's been doing it for 50 years. So we definitely have developed a lot of methods to be able to do that. Jay's goal was to be able to start a company where he actually could explore his love of skulls and share skulls and skeletons with the world, with the medical community, with the veterinary community, with the educational community, with the art community. And that's why we founded Skulls Unlimited in 1986. And Jay and his wife just began our company out of their house. They began selling skulls basically by processing them through cleaning them at their residence. And they started off with just a one-page price list of skulls that were available for sale. And our first zoo education department order came from the Brookfield Zoo in Chicago. And since then, we are now the world's leading suppliers of osteological specimens. We provide medical institutions, forensic institutions, private collectors, television and movies, from Disney to the TV show Bones or CSI New York, or even popular Hollywood movies like Suicide Squad. We provide specimens and replica specimens for entertainment as well as education. But once Jay was able to have this company established and able to support him and his family with a company, Skulls Unlimited, he had a new dream. And that was to be able to open up a museum with all of the specimens that he's been collecting throughout his life. And we opened up the Museum of Osteology in Oklahoma City in 2010. And it took them 7.5 years to put together this specimens that we opened with. We opened with about 300 articulated skeletons. Each skeleton takes weeks or months to prepare. And today we have about 500 skeletons on display. Of course, we've been open for 14 years now. In May of 2015, we opened our second location in Orlando, Florida. That museum had 500 skeletons on display. It was there in Orlando for a period of 5 years. And in January 10th, 2020 was our last day open. And it was at that time we decided we were going to focus on traveling exhibitions. So instead of being located in like two, just permanent locations, we wanted to take these skeletons on the road to visit cities throughout the United States. And I'm happy to report that, of course, with the pandemic, we had to put that project on hold. But we have been working every day since November of 2021 to bring to life the traveling exhibit, and it will begin traveling in March of 2024. It's a 6,000 square foot exhibit with over 130 real skeletons in the exhibit, and it's going to be traveling between Canada and the United States for a period of 5 to 7 years, or 7 to 8 years, they're estimating now because of the popularity. So we're just so excited about the traveling exhibit. So maybe one day soon, our exhibit will come to a city near you. We have many different exhibits. Primarily, the exhibits are arranged by taxonomy. So they're going to be arranged by groupings and similarities and classification. Primarily, that's how they're arranged. We do have exhibits on certain topics, such as human anatomy and forensics with real human skeletons. We have a comparative anatomy. We have a what is a skeleton. We have locomotion and skeletal adaptations. We have a fossil hominids exhibit. We have a Oklahoma wildlife exhibit as well, other than our taxonomy exhibits. And I have many different photos to share with you all of those exhibits, just so you can get a good sense of what we have here. And this is only what we have on display. 90% of our collection is not even on display. What you're about to see is just 10% of our collection. We have primates exhibits that go all the way from prosimians and lemurs to New World apes, New World monkeys, Old World monkeys, and then we have our apes and then fossil hominids. We have a pinniped exhibit. We have flightless birds. We have a penguin exhibit. We have a ratite exhibit. We have about 106 species of bird on display in the gallery alone. We have a carnivora exhibit. We have an exhibit just on felids. We have an exhibit just on canines. We have our human anatomy and forensics exhibits, which discusses topics from skeletal growth and aging to forensics to abnormalities and pathologies and bone remodeling. We have some rare specimens like Indian gharials, which is a crocodilian. In that photo, you can also see the amphibians exhibit with a giant salamander. We like to arrange our skeletons based on how they would live, how they would be in life. We feel like that's very educational for people. Now, the comparative collection is where most of the specimens are located. So you can see from these photos, this is more of your traditional museum pieces and catalogs. And so pictured here is me with the rodents exhibit. And then, of course, we have the drawers on our pinnipeds exhibit. And you all are welcome to ask any questions in the chat. I am seeing everything in the chat. So please, if you do have any questions, I would love to know. But we have over 1,500 species represented in the collection, about 7,000 specimens. I do have a little video to play. This is a preview, so it is fairly short. It's a preview to our Netflix episode called Skeleton Inc. And it was on Netflix for about 5 years. And it was a special reality show that we did for a program. It was actually filmed in 3D. Can you imagine? They were over in the processing division the whole time. But this trailer, we almost might want to even watch it twice, just because there's so many things that are touched upon in this trailer. You really get the sense of, okay, this is what this company does every single day. We have nearly 40 employees that are dedicated to this cause of osteology and skeletal preparation every single day. We have technicians. They work 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. every single day, defleshing. They work every single day, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., chemically whitening and sanitizing. We have people working 40 hours a week, putting together anaconda skeletons, one rib by one rib. They're putting together 1,000 bones. So I think this little preview really just shows everyone what it is that we're doing every single day. It's just the norm to us. It's just like what we've grown accustomed to, what we're used to doing. But having said that, if anyone, this is your, warning, viewer discretion. We are showing specimens fully intact. I'm so sorry. Mid-process, we're showing specimens with the tissue on them. So please, if you feel like that's not something you want to see, I would not, watch this. It is a preview, but it's still graphic.
They fascinate and repulse us.
Everything we do is bloody, gory, distressful. It's really disgusting.
But within this world is knowledge and beauty.
I like, getting a pile of bones and turning it into an art piece for display.
This is the world of Jay and the Villamorettes, an ordinary family.
Hey guys, can I get some help?
Running a very out of the ordinary business.
I'm about to throw up.
That is terrible.
Their job? Stripping dead bodies down to bare bones. Their clients? Labs, schools, and collectors of the creepy. Animal or human, no job's too small, too big, or too weird. And this work is not for the squeamish.
People just don't really like to be involved with dead animals.
This is Skeleton Inc.
What do you think of that? What did you all think of that? Was that surprising? The entire episode is available online. It's about 44 minutes long. I highly recommend it. I watched it in 2011 when it came out. I watched it in my dorm room. And as soon as it was done, I immediately watched it again. I could not get enough of it. I said, I cannot believe that there is something that exists out there where you can combine, anatomy, conservation, forensics, like this scientific method that they have and approach, this hands-on process, this creative, artistic, scientific process. I didn't even know that, I was first exposed to the company and when I was 15 years old from the TV show Dirty Jobs with Mike Rowe. And some of you have probably seen that episode with Mike Rowe. And the episode was called Skull Cleaner. And that's when I was first introduced to it. And I thought, this is just the coolest thing I've ever heard of. I said, I'll have a career doing whatever I'm, forced to do, but then I'll have a second career doing what I want to do, which is to be able to be involved with something like this. Couple questions that we got. The human skull that you saw in the previous slide, that was a child's skull that had been prepared with the dentition exposed. Dental eruption is fairly precise in humans, or a range of precision. And this specimen was prepared with the outer layer of the maxilla and the mandible cut away. So you can actually see the secondary set of teeth as the deciduous teeth are pushed out. Like you can see the secondary set of adult teeth. So this would have to be done by a highly trained technician by hand, always by hand.
Actually, I think the last thing you said ties into it, this other question here about advice to a high school senior who wants to work there. What path should they take to get a job articulating skeletons?
For us, specifically, people always ask, what are your technicians? Like, what do you have to do? What's the prerequisite? I would say primarily, good work ethic. We need reliable people, technicians, but, just a strong interest in art, anatomy, a strong ability to work with your hands. It's such a hands-on process. We have people who have come to us from the food service industry. We have people who have anthropology degrees. It's a really huge variation in our staff. We have people with just needed a job, and they had maybe worked a couple other jobs or a factory or that type of position, and they work for us now, and they're highly specialized in what they do. That's what I'd say is, you have to have a strong interest and kind of a passion for what you do, and you have to also be willing to learn the process. Ours is such a specialized process that we perfected over the last 4 decades that we often, it's better if maybe someone would come in with an open, blank slate, basically, and a strong stomach. They have stories of, people will start off the day, brand new job, brand new position, and they do not make it back after lunch. They don't even come back after lunch. So we do recognize that this is, you know, to us, it's every day now, but to people first coming on and being exposed to it, they've never seen anything like this before. So yeah, the smell, you know, it's like an experience. It's more of a taste than a smell in some cases. So just let that sink in for a second. But it's just kind of a normal part of the job, and you get used to it basically. And everyone, you know, knows the importance of what we're doing, the importance of preserving specimens. You know, I didn't touch on it too much before, but the specimens that we place within educational facilities, they're actually what forensic scientists are using to solve homicides. They're actually what people, you know, for a baseline for comparison, they're actually what is being used in veterinary hospitals to teach technicians dental procedures. They're actually being used in radiology departments. So I'm always reminded in different ways of the importance of what we're doing. And I think everyone here takes a lot of pride in what we do and the important role that we have in the scientific world and museum world. So I'm reminded all the time. I went to go teach classes at a local veterinary hospital. They have about 200 employees, and I was teaching classes there. And I walk into the radiology department, and what do I see? All of our skulls lined up in a row with all of our tags next to them, and they use them on a daily basis. And veterinarians come from all over the state to train at that facility, and it's such a great feeling. I went and took forensics classes at Washburn University, and you know, I'm there as like a student, you know, learning more. And what do I see? What are we learning with? Our skulls with our company tag on them, and I recognize them immediately. So it's a really good feeling, a really rewarding feeling, knowing we're impacting people on so many different levels and reaching so many different institutions. So now you probably are wondering, okay, acquisition. Where do you even come up with, you know, where are you getting these 7,000 specimens? That's what people want to know. Well, we have been working for this entire time, making relationships with zoos, aquariums, rehabilitations, nature preserves, private collectors. I was just telling some guests before I lost my voice, the large sei whale skull we have in the lobby, it's about 11 feet tall, 880 pounds. They want to know how do you even get something like that? That animal washed up on shore, its carcass washed ashore in Washington State, and the tribe, the indigenous people there, the tribe made the decision to donate the animal's carcass to us. But most of the specimens come to us as donations from zoos and aquariums. We work with about 30 zoos regularly to accept their animals when they pass away. And it's our position that, you know, it is an extremely sad day when an animal passes away at a zoo, but that doesn't have to be the end of its teaching abilities. We are able to honor that animal and all of the care that's gone into making that animal an ambassador for its species. We're able to continue that work even after the animal's passed. We have, through our museums, we've welcomed over 500,000 visitors. So we like to think that we are definitely making a difference in continuing the education aspect and conservation and continuing the interest in animals that live today. There's a slide later that talks about, you know, where's all the dinosaurs? People always want to know the dinosaurs, but isn't it amazing that you can stand underneath the skeleton of a humpback whale and, you know, marvel at the size of it, and this animal's still alive? And baleen whales are the biggest animals that have ever lived on the planet. There's a lot of there's so much importance to the biodiversity of the animals that live today, and we're lucky to be able to honor those animals. Pictured here is Jay next to our largest articulated elephant, which is a male bull elephant, African elephant. That elephant is about 1,500 pounds. The height of the skull is about 12 foot tall, just over 12 foot. And that is in our processing division. You can see the large walk-in freezers behind the skeleton. We have some very large freezer capabilities. So that brings us to our processing division. This is the building where everyone's dedicated to getting specimens through the door. Mass tissue removal, flensing is what it's called. We get rid of all the tissue. We're using multiple methods to remove flesh from skeletons. We are chemically whitening and sanitizing. We are articulating skeletons and preparing them for placement in education facilities, or we're preparing them for our museum's collection. So how we process the skeletons is dependent upon a few factors. How they are, the state of decomposition. Mostly when they come to us at zoos and aquariums, the animal's frozen and may have been frozen for over a decade. You know, we may be getting specimens right now that passed away, you know, when I was still in high school. So most of the time it's a fully intact specimen. Most of our specimens, because we work with a lot of AZA facilities, there's a lot of strict rules regarding necropsy. And the necropsy would be like the animal version of an autopsy. And we often receive the animal after the necropsy. So the animal comes to us, you know, in pieces basically, but still with tissue. So we would have to remove that tissue. Occasionally you get specimens that are nature cleaned. That's called skeletonization. They have some tissue. So there might be a different method that we use, but basically the specimen has a lot of preparation before it gets to the beetles. Way before it gets to the beetles, we have to be taking a lot of steps. We would look at the age of the specimen. Animals that are very young require a lot more delicacy, and that is because the bones have not fully formed. Just for example, of a human skeleton, a neonate has up to 350 bones in our skeleton at birth. So those bones will grow and fuse together to ultimately equal around 206. So if you're dealing with a specimen that's very young, the plates have not fused, the ends of the bones have not fused, and you have extra cartilage, that will factor in how we're processing it through the beetles. The size of the specimen, we process from hummingbirds and shrews to humpback whales. So there's a lot to take into account, different methods that we can use. We would not use the same method for a hummingbird as we would a humpback whale. So the first step is basically flensing, removing the flesh and tissue. The word flensing comes from an old whaling term, and it would describe the knives they use to cut the tissue. So we would call it a flensing knife or a paring knife, and flensing is just the mass tissue removal, basically. So the types of materials we would need: surgical gloves, very sharp knives. You always want to keep your tools very sharp. You always want to be being able to document the flensing process in some cases where it may be tricky to put the skeleton back together. You need a lot of patience, precision, accuracy. You're not necessarily going to damage the bone, you know, by taking the tissue off, but this is really a crucial step for the following steps. Just as photos that we have here. This is me. Top photo is a pygmy killer whale. And you can see how different the flesh, the tissue, look how dark it is. I can only assume that has something to do with the blood and how it's oxygenated, being a marine mammal, and the tissue is almost black. But that was the pygmy killer whale. On the bottom, that's a tiger skull. And in the photo, I was using a pair of hemostats and I think scalpel to remove the ocular nerve in the eyeball, basically. There's a lot of tissue that's packed onto a tiger skull. Every bit of tissue, muscle between their skull, their jaw, and their sagittal crest basically correlates to bite power. So they have just huge amount of muscle packed on their skull and jaw, and we have to take all of that off by hand. We also have a special vacuuming suction device. It's called the cerebral extractor, but sometimes we call it the debrainer. And it's basically a suction vacuum device that goes up through the spinal cord foramen magnum, and we suck the brains out essentially. That's one method that we use. I did see some questions come through. People can get their own beetle colony. Yeah, I had my own for about 4 years. You can purchase them online, or the way we did it, we cultivated our own and from a cow that passed away here in Oklahoma City, and we're in the triple digits for numbers of generations since the original colony. So some people do prefer to maintain a beetle colony. I'd say it's required if you plan on processing certain animals, like small animals or reptiles even. An animal might be held that long in a facility before finding its way to us because I guess things come up in different veterinary departments, and they may keep an animal. When an animal passes away to zoo, they might retain it in the freezer to donate to their local college, university, or wildlife lab. They may incinerate the animal. When they choose to incinerate, usually the way that it's charged is by pound. That's what I know. So like you could see how that would be very expensive for some of those animals. So sometimes it's might not just be a priority to disperse those animals. So sometimes we do see animals passed away 2015, like that would be a common time I would estimate right now for an animal to have passed away 7 years ago and then is only coming as a donation now. Also because maybe a specimen passed away here and there, and it's just maybe easier to make a donation at one time of multiple animals. It's a great question about if we have a skeletal map on hand of animals. It's amazing that our technicians just do this every single day, that they really know their anatomy well. They are able to touch and feel, and they're able to map out in their mind of where this bone is, like how deep I need to go. And many animals follow the same patterns. That's one thing you start to notice right away. And, certain over time, you just know certain animals have like variations to them. Like, what whale is going to be like. What pig is going to be like, how greasy it's going to be. Just from experience, like how deep to go and about the anatomy. That's not to say we don't get new specimens every now and then, but generally, a lot of animals follow these same patterns. And I think that's how they kind of prepare themselves for it. Okay, back to the beetles, which is what everyone always loves to talk about. Everyone's always surprised that there's actually over 500 species of dermestid beetle. Dermestid, Dermestes would refer to the genus. The beetles that we use are Dermestes maculatus, but there are hundreds of species of carrion beetle, and carrion, of course, being that they are beetles that only feed on dead flesh or tissue that's decaying. We get a ton of questions on, will they cannibalize? They will, they're only a carrion beetle, so they're only drawn to decay. We hold them and handle them all day, and they would never hurt us. But these beetles, they are also known to eat taxidermy, books, paper. I've even seen them eat plastic before. And they're just the best thing to use. This is what their role is out in nature. So that's why we're able to use them. You'll see the mixture of adult and larva in this graphic here. So you can see the adult beetle very clearly. The larvae look like small caterpillars. They have hair-like structures coming off of them. A healthy colony is going to have an equal amount of both larva and adult beetle. We do have tanks on display for the public to be able to see. This photo is from our Orlando location. We had a time-lapse video, so guests could see a tiger skull being cleaned over a period of 72 hours. We have scavenger hunts, of course, for the kids, and we ask them questions about the beetles on the scavenger hunts. But the life cycle of the flesh-eating beetle is anywhere between 4 to 6 months, as I've heard the estimations. First, they're born as an egg, and then they will emerge as a tiny larva, and there's several instar stages to where they molt, and then they become ready to pupate. When they pupate, they will pupate in their substrate, in their bedding. So you can see from the tanks that a substrate is at the bottom. That's where all the people would be located, is within that substrate. Then they emerge as an adult beetle, and the adult beetles, of course, they will be eating and reproducing, and the life cycle begins all over. I've heard, people ask questions about, well, which one is it that actually eats? Both the larva and the adult beetles will do the consuming of the flesh. These beetles are also used in forensic entomology, which of course is the branch of zoology dealing with insects, but we apply it to criminal cases like homicides. So we're actually able to create a timeline of death based on what insects are present on a person's body. We do have to go through a sanitizing and whitening process, and maybe even repeat that process depending on the animal. Certain species are really known to retain their oils. Whales are a great example. And of course, that's why whaling existed, is because they are so saturated full of oils. And of course, like one thing I've noticed myself is, as we were flensing and defleshing the pygmy killer whale, as we got to the skull, it was almost to the point where the flesh was just slipping between my fingers because it was so oily, I couldn't grab onto it. So every specimen or species is a little bit different, but sometimes the process has to be repeated. We would use a chemical mixture, hydrogen peroxide may be part of that mixture, being that it will oxygenate the bone, it will whiten and sanitize it, and it will not damage it. We get a lot of questions on, do we bleach them? No, we don't bleach them. They have a bleached quality because they're white, but we would never use bleach. Bleach will break the collagen down that actually holds the bone together, so we would never use bleach. This is a photo of a whale skeleton hanging up at our processing. So it obviously spans several people's workstations. Articulation is just the process of assembling and connecting all of those bones back together. We use rods, wires. Every single bone is fastened and drilled and has a framework to it and is secured and is sealed. And basically, we're trying to restore the skeleton to what the animal would be moving like in life. We always try to make sure the positioning is, one, we're creating an artistic, intriguing pose that's going to be educational. But also we have to think about the physics of the specimen. When you're putting together a humpback whale skeleton, and that skeleton might weigh, almost 2,000 pounds, there's different considerations that you have to take into place, and making sure you're using the strong enough materials that are going to be able to serve the specimen well over a period of, our skeletons could be teaching for hundreds of years from now, the way that we've been able to assemble them. All of our technicians kind of specialize in a different area. We have one technician who's been with us for over 3 decades, who primarily now focuses on human. We have a technician, there's Joey pictured. He is very great at putting together fish skeletons. You can see there is a lot to a fish skeleton. A fish skull might have up to 300 bones in the skull alone. And they're like paper. They're layered on top of each other like tissue paper. So there's a lot of, I'm sure each skeleton has a huge learning curve that comes with it. But if you're doing this for a living, after 15, 16 years, Joey's been working for us, and his specialty is definitely fish. Articulation, basically we're assembling a full-scale model using pins, wires, rods. We have to fasten everything back together. We also think about how the specimen is going to be used. For our traveling exhibit, we have to take that into consideration because these skeletons are going to be traveling maybe 1,800, 2,000 miles in a single trip, rattling in a moving truck. So we have to take that into account. A skeleton that's in our classroom, for example, we actually would make movable and bendable at the joints, so it can be a great reference for us for anatomy classes. So each of the specimens is kind of the way it's put together, how it's assembled. We keep the true to the anatomy of the animal. We want to keep it realistic. We want to keep it artistic, and we want to keep it safe, basically. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it. And you can see the various tools that we use. A lot of our staff is just really great at using their hands. Most of the people that work next door are able to, we have musicians that work next door. We have people who build musical instruments. We have people that build, all kinds of things outside of work. And it just shows their attention to detail, basically, and the abilities they have with their hands. Question that we got in here is, how do we receive and sell human bones? Interesting question. So when it comes to human specimens, there's a lot to go over, but basically, I guess I could just say this like in general, is when it comes to human skeletons, modern today in the United States, you really have to think of it as two separate groups. One group of those bones would be human bones that have been in the United States for decades, that have been in, where were basically brought over for medical purposes, universities, medical schools, dental schools, human bones and skulls from countries like India and China. Those are basically able to be bought and sold by an individual person with no credentials. Basically, when one of them sells, the price of all of them goes up because there's a fixed number here. So like a human skull of a high quality would cost about $1,800 to $2,000 today in the US. A human skeleton would cost about $5,000. Totally separate from that is another group of human remains, and that would be human remains that were through human donor programs, to where the individual or their families decided when it was appropriate to donate. And then those donations, we've commonly heard donating your body to science. That would be like a medical school, university, a human cadaver program for surgeons is an example of that. So ultimately, that skeleton, that cadaver may come to us after those terms, and then we are able to place the clean specimen within an educational facility. But like really, it should be thought of as two totally separate groups. An average person would never have access to those medical specimens that are donated for educational purposes versus skeletons and bones that are able for anyone to be purchased. A lot of people are surprised that humans are a species that has some of the least laws or protections on of any mammal that we see. So people always say, well, is it illegal? No, it's not. And it's just interesting to me that, some of our other species, marine mammals, heavily protected, migratory birds, extremely protected, like all of these protections. And, humans just simply don't have those legislation, those rules behind them. But things that are always illegal, things that we would never see or be involved in are, bones that have been stolen from graves, bones that are viable, it can be transplanted to one person to another. We would never see anything like that. Another method would be specimens that are Native American. So those are all things that are very, very illegal. And just that is, I guess, the briefest overview that I could give over human specimens. What about dinosaurs? People always want to know, where's the dinosaurs? Why don't we have them? Of course, that's because of how we acquire our specimens. They're from animals that live today, from zoos and aquariums. But everything that we learn about an animal that is a dinosaur, we build off of it based on our knowledge of animals that live today. All of the biomechanics is still the same because of the way that dinosaurs and other extinct animals are discovered. They're often eroding out of the rock, and they're incomplete, they're partial, and we often have to use modern animals to fill in those blanks. So if you have an interest in dinosaurs, you really would have an interest in animals that live today as well. So fossilized bone contains muscle attachment. That gives us size on clues and how the animal moves. By looking at their limbs, we can tell how they moved and what type of environment they lived in. We can look at their bones and see if they had any evidence of disease or trauma. We can figure out what was challenging to that animal throughout its lifetime. We can look at the injuries recorded in the bone, the injuries at the time of death. We can look at the signs of diseases or deficiencies. We can look at eye placement, predator versus prey. We can look at dentition. We can look at micro and macro wear on dentition to tell us what an animal or a person had been eating over the period of time. We can actually look at the elemental composition of bone to figure out where someone had lived geographically in their lifetime. There's a lot that we can go into, but even if you're interested in only dinosaurs, there's so much we can learn from animals live today that we use to fill in the blanks for the animals of the past. We do tons of events here at the museum trying to reach people of all ages, all different audiences of all different interest levels. We do so many different events here at the museum. The most popular is the forensic date night, where we use replica human skulls. These replicas are copies from real homicides and accidental deaths. And we teach people how to do an age assessment, sex estimation, evaluate any trauma signatures, blunt force, sharp force, gunshot wounds. We teach them how to look for evidence of diseases. And throughout the 2-hour class, they actually develop and collect data and osteometric data, and they have to present and defend their findings at the end. And that's a super popular event that we do. We also have Skeletal, which is our yoga that we do once a month in the museum. We do artist events, a ton of educational classes that we have. And we have been doing a ton of weddings lately. So many different ceremonies. We have 2 weddings. We have 2 weddings in the next 10 days. So if you ever wanted to see the most unique venue you've ever heard of, your guests would be talking about it for years to come. But it's just another way to reach people and teach them about the importance of the specimens. We do a ton of field trips and programs. You know, year to date, kids that we put through programs, I think we're at about 7,000 so far, and that's just through our education department. We have a number of hands-on classes. You can see the different topics here. This is our regular programs, although we do have specialty programs as well. It's so hands-on. It really, we get kids now, you know, we've been open for 14 years. So we have been open long enough to see our students come back to us now as educators. And that is such a cool thing to see. Or I was just talking to someone that I met at the AZA conference, and they said, I visited your museum in Orlando and it inspired me to actually go back to school. And now I work at the Tennessee Aquarium. And I never would have done that unless I was inspired by my visit at the Museum of Osteology. So we love hearing that. And I know that that happens on a daily basis here because we teach these classes every single day to kids. And I know that they're being inspired to become veterinarians. They're being inspired to become paleontologists or zoologists. Like, we see it every day. I know it happens. So that kind of leaves me with our hope. Our hope for the future is basically we want our museum to serve as an educational experience with hopes that through education, people will develop an appreciation of the natural world, and ultimately that will lead to conservation. So that's really what we are trying to do every single day. I do see a question here from a science teacher who's been collecting window strike birds. Oh, wow. You know, most birds are going to be protected. So if you have any questions on that, I'd say to contact the local wildlife department about it, because so many birds are migratory. As far as a separate issue from that, as far as prepping, when it comes to birds, those bones are very delicate. Birds have hollow bones in general as an adaptation, of course, for flight. So I would, if I were doing it myself, I would definitely recommend fleshing beetles. There would be flensing still required. You would never want to put fully intact specimen in the beetles because the fully intact specimen would rot faster than the beetles could eat it. And then you're dealing with a whole new set of problems. Basically, you're going to contaminate the colony. It's just going to be a mess, and you're going to compromise the specimen if you let it rot. So I would say to flens first and then to follow up with the beetles right afterwards, definitely. Is there anyone who has any other types of questions, or maybe you want to see that preview for Skeleton Inc. again? Again, that video is available online, Skeleton Inc. It was filmed in 2011. And the 44-minute episode I have seen online, as well as the Dirty Jobs episode that we had, Skull Cleaner. I've seen that one online as well.
I have to admit, I haven't thought about that show, Dirty Jobs, in a while. I totally remember that show. That was awesome.
He's coming back. He came back for another season. They revamped it, and we've been trying to, reach them if they want to come back to see us, because we've grown a lot since then, and would love to have them back. Suggestions on how to deal with the smell at an at-home colony. I would say to prep your specimens very carefully, making sure that all the tissue is removed. And you may want to consider drying out the specimen, being like kind of dehydrate them, kind of make them like a burnt beef jerky consistency. I know that's not a normal thing it's normal for me to explain, but if the tissue that remains is like a beef jerky consistency, then will be least likely to decay, and you'll cut down on the smell basically. So heavily dried out specimen is going to help. And then whenever I had them in my dorm room, but I was keeping them in the garage for a period, and then like a spare room. And you just want to make sure that you keep them in a somewhat stable environment to be the most productive.
I have this cool turtle shell that still has a spine on it.
Oh, very nice. Let's see.
I'm very proud of my turtle shell.
That's great. A lot of people are surprised to learn that the turtle shell is the rib bones that have fused around the animal's body. That's why the spinal column they showed was fused to the ribs, or fused to the shell.
Yeah, I'm studying to be a veterinary assistant, so it's really helpful to have stuff like this.
That's great. We have a bone box subscription. It's a monthly new skull to your front door every month. And we see it really popular with students. I see a question. I've seen some of us, you're commenting that you've actually been to our Oklahoma City location or our Orlando exhibit. We really appreciate that. And if you ever have a chance to get out here to Oklahoma, I mean, if you are even just people who aren't even interested in this topic, leave with a huge appreciation and new interest in skeletal anatomy. And you mentioned the Smithsonian osteology exhibit. We've actually put together skeletons for the Smithsonian. So if you've ever been to the Georgia Aquarium, there's a very large right whale that we actually put together for them. Question on the waste. The waste is either incinerated or disposed of, basically, the tissue. Thanks for your question.
Thank you, Ashley, for your time. That was amazing.
I'm glad you were able to hear me.
Yeah, no, it was great. It turned out really well. My only comment would be that we should have done it before Halloween, or like on Halloween, because it's so like seasonally appropriate. That was so cool.
If you want to do it next year, you'll have to book us now, because I'm telling you, everybody wants skeletons. Month of October is probably one of our top 3 months. Everybody has skeletons on their mind. And one thing I didn't mention, something that a lot of people love, is some of you have probably seen our office cat who's gone viral recently. His name is Indiana Bones. He's a black cat. We rescued him from our local shelter. If you don't follow him, you can follow him on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, and Sir Indiana Bones is his handles. And he's probably become the most famous out of all of us lately, because he is just blowing up online. He's a little black cat who runs around the museum and tries not to get into too much trouble, but you can follow his adventures. People have been loving that. It's been a great way to reach new people who maybe not so interested in bones, but are now interested because of cats. We all love, well, a lot of people love cats.
No, we all love cats.
Yeah.
If people don't love cats, they can keep it to themselves. I love it. Questions? More questions? I agree. So interesting. Your passion is obvious. Skeletons are cool, not creepy. This is a great presentation. I'm echoing the comments that are coming in on the chat. Thanks so much. That was really great. I appreciate your time.
Oh, it's my
Last call. Any
pleasure.
other questions?
You should see me on a good day, but I'm not sick.
I appreciate that. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care, y'all. See you next time.